Miller Moss is the next QB1 for the Louisville Cardinals.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this special Sunday evening edition of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the university, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can bet $5 and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Louisville has landed their guy. Miller Moss announced on Saturday that he would be transferring from USC to play for the Cardinals and be QB1 for Jeff Brohm's team next season. We'll discuss the significance for that on and off the field. The men's basketball team went to Rupp Arena. They fought tremendously, but ultimately came up a little bit short against the Wildcats. Really proud of the fight, but we're going to have a discussion about the team moving forward. And the volleyball team, back to the Final Four for the third time in 4 seasons. Dani Busboom Kelly's team avenged the regular season finale loss against Stanford in the Elite Eight. We'll discuss how the team did it. It was an eventful Saturday. In the course of 4 to 5 hours, there was a lot going on. Jeff Brohm took a phone call at Rupp Arena. He went into the hallway. It was Miller Moss telling him that he was committing to Louisville to be the Cardinals quarterback next season. Louisville got their guy. Technically, it's the first time that they got their first option at quarterback since Brohm's been here. First off season, they missed out on Austin Reed, who decided to stay at Western Kentucky, ended up getting Jack Plummer. Missed out on Cam Ward last offseason. There were some disagreements with NIL. It seemed like Ward wanted a little bit too much than Louisville was willing to give, and Louisville pivoted to Tyler Shuck. Now, granted, both of the quarterbacks that Louisville got led successful campaigns, and I'm not suggesting the contrary. But Louisville getting their guy and winning a high-profile recruiting battle against an SEC program, it's definitely good for the team on the field, but it's really important off the field as well. The optics of winning this recruitment just continue to push the narrative that this system is quarterback friendly, that you would be foolish to not consider Louisville. And that was something that we had kind of entertained a couple of weeks ago. It's like, hey, why, if you're a top quarterback in the portal, why not look at Jeff Brohm's team? Why not go to a program where your skill set is going to be maximized? And, well, Miller Moss, I guess, listen to the show. No, in all seriousness, it makes a lot of sense for both parties. Let's get this out of the way. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Miller Moss was benched in season this year for USC. Now, why depends on who you talk to. My personal opinion, and from the people that I've talked to, suggests that, well, the USC offense needed a scapegoat. Lincoln Riley's play calling seemed to get stale and predictable, and he didn't necessarily do Miller Moss any favors. So they benched him. They went with a dual threat quarterback, and then again, the offense didn't look better when they benched Moss. Now, did he have a perfect year? No, not at all. I think that he didn't live up to the hype of this year after that win against LSU in Vegas. I think that, there were some turnover issues. He had 2,555 yards, 18 touchdowns, but 9 interceptions. So he had those turnover issues, 64% completion percentage. One of those situations to where I think both parties were at fault. Miller Moss didn't necessarily help his case. Now, the offensive line was just bad. And the offensive line play being bad is going to have a direct impact on quarterback play. USC didn't seem to have a huge rushing threat on a week in, week out basis. Granted, Woody Marks, I felt like was a really talented running back. It just felt like it all comes back to the USC offense being stale and predictable. Now, did Miller Moss get bailed out by his weapons, his receivers, sometimes with good catches? Yes. Did he make some throws that were too late? Yes. Did he have some really costly turnovers? Again, the answer is yes. He wasn't perfect. But if I am a Louisville fan, just the statement of approval from Jeff Brohm is good enough for me. Won 10 games with Jack Plummer, had a really good offensive season with Tyler Shough. Miller Moss can come into this system with a really good offensive line, with a great rushing attack, and with good weapons, and have a really good 2025 campaign. No doubt in my mind. The schedule allows for it. There were some talks that Missouri might have had a larger NIL package, but the fit for Moss in Louisville just made too much sense to pass that up. This was a really weird recruitment because both sides were extremely confident, and we got up to what was proclaimed to be decision day, and no side could call it. Like, none of the national insiders came out and made a crystal ball projection. Like, it was truly a 50-50 coin flip, which leads me to believe that even Miller Moss was torn, but he ended up making the decision to come to the Cardinals. And like I said, I feel like some of the issues that Moss has, I feel like Jeff Brohm is going to be able to maximize his skill set. He's been able to do that with Plummer. He's been able to do that with Shough. He's been able to do that with, insert quarterback hero over the years. And sort of to wrap up the USC discussion as well, USC had Caleb Williams, Heisman Trophy winner, #1 draft pick, couldn't get to the playoff. 9 wins. So that just goes to show you that it might not always be on the quarterback, but I'm not going to continue to have that argument. We're going to move on from that. I feel like this makes sense for both parties. Miller Moss is unlike Tyler Shough when it comes to arm strength. Moss doesn't have the arm strength that Shough has. But what he doesn't have with arm strength, he excels at with different parts of the game. I think that he has a good internal clock. Is able to evade pressure, isn't really the most athletic, but really solid instincts and intuition. I think has the potential to be really accurate on the short and intermediate throws. He's shown that drop in the bucket type throwing, if you will, right? So I look at this and I see all of the concerns that, the arm strength, the turnovers. And I'm like, yes, every quarterback that you could bring in is going to have their own issues, but which can you take their skill set, put it in your system, and maximize that player? And I feel like Miller Moss is not like a Jeff Brohm quarterback when it comes to size. He's only 6'1", but when it comes to the skill set, I really think that he's going to have a successful year. And for Moss, this obviously makes sense because you join quarterback-friendly offense, one that just took Tyler Shough from undrafted range to potential day 3 NFL draft pick, had a really good year. Same with Jack Plummer. You have a great running game, Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of you. Your offensive line brought some pieces back from a vastly improved unit at the end of the year, and you also brought some other guys in. Nair Jackson from Florida International is going to be a great offensive guard. You have Mac Pounders, who we're going to talk about on tomorrow's episode of the show, tackle transfer from Mississippi State. And then the guys you have returning, Pete Nigra, potentially Monroe Mills, potentially Renato Brown, you name it. So offensive line's going to look good. You have Colin Lacey, who hopefully is going to be fully healthy, potentially Chris Bell, and some other weapons that we might not even know about yet, that Louisville has yet to bring in. So, and not to mention the schedule. Like, you go to Missouri, and Brady Cook didn't have a great year. I don't think that Eli Drinkwitz is running a system that's very quarterback friendly. I think it was masked over because you had Luther Burden and Theo Weiss for the past 2 years. But Brady Cook did not have a great year. You're playing in the SEC where you're probably not going to be a contender. You can go to the ACC, contend for a conference championship, be a playoff hopeful team. And I mean, it just made too much sense. And I don't want to obviously put words into Miller Moss's mouth, but it feels like that's the basis of the decision, because I was told multiple times that if it was about money, he would have gone to Missouri. But it seems like, he wants to be able to have a good season, be surrounded by a ton of help, have a quarterback coach, and have an offensive-minded coach that can be able to maximize your skill set and also put together some good NFL draft tape for you. So really, really excited about this edition. I wanted Miller Moss really badly to be a Cardinal, and he is QB1. And we'll discuss a little bit more of the other details when it comes to, are we going to see any more quarterbacks enter the portal that Louisville has right now? Is Pierce Clarkson going to stay? What about Deuce Adams, Harrison Bailey, you name it? So we'll discuss some returning pieces coming up at a later date. But when we come back, the men's basketball team went into Rupp Arena. They fought. They kept it close. Ultimately, they weren't able to seize momentum, and the fifth-ranked Kentucky Wildcats defeated Louisville 93-85. And I'm not one for moral victories, but guys, I'm not giving up on this team just yet. And I'll explain why when we come back on this Sunday evening episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Well, it was pretty close. FanDuel had Louisville as a 9.5-point favorite a 9.5-point underdog at tip-off, and it went back and forth at the end. Kentucky ended up winning the game by 8. And I'm not one to bet on or against my team, because if I bet for them, they'll lose, and it's just not my speed. But regardless, FanDuel is my place where I go to bet. It's America's #1 sportsbook. If you're new, you can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. I love the app. I've started to get into live betting, and it's really convenient in terms of the app where it breaks it down, because you don't really have a lot of time when it comes to live betting. You've got to make decisions quickly. FanDuel makes it convenient and really easy to follow and understand. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel. An official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Tomorrow's episode of the show, we're discussing some commitments that Jeff Brohm got out of the portal this weekend. Mac Pounders being one of them, the Mississippi State tackle, and some other players to talk about. David Bailey, edge rusher from Rutgers. But we're now in the men's basketball sector of the show. Louisville fought in Rupp on Saturday. They did their best. I'm not really a moral victory guy, and I'll explain that here in a second. But I was proud of the fight. You're down to, let's call it 7 scholarship players, because Pat Kelsey's not playing Frank Anselm eBay that much. 7 scholarship players against the number 5 team in the country. You kept it close, but ultimately it was just a matter of not being able to get over the hump. They had some chances with some 3-point shots to get the lead to a single possession, and they just weren't able to hit those shots, which has been an issue this year. They shot the ball better than they usually do, 36% from the 3-point line. They made 14 threes, but it was shot defense. Kentucky, 58% from the field, 52% from 3, 11-21 shooting, and they made more free throws than Louisville attempted. Now, I'll go ahead and get this out of the way. I find it hilarious. And I'm not really one to – I'll acknowledge officiating, but I'll never blame a loss on it. Like, Louisville didn't lose this game because of officiating. Kentucky was just the better team on Saturday. But to see Kentucky fans on Twitter claiming that they're playing 5-on-8 and that officiating was in the Louisville's favor. Now, did Louisville get away with some calls like a walk in the first half and a couple of other situations? Sure. How many times did Kentucky not get called for a flagrant foul after elbowing a guy in the head or stepping on his abdomen or smacking him in the face, poking his eye? That was one player, by the way. Kentucky made more free throws than Louisville attempted. That alone completely shatters any argument that you can make that Louisville was getting the favorable whistle. It was 18 of 28 for Kentucky, 9 of 14 for Louisville. But again, just had to point that out because I found it really hilarious. Wasn't the reason that Louisville lost. Kentucky was the better team. But, I mean, you look at the Cardinals did a better job at handling the basketball. 7 turnovers to Kentucky's 11. The assists really weren't there. Kentucky had 23 assists. Louisville had 8. That is something that has to be better. I was really impressed with Terrence Edwards. I feel like he came off the bench, played pretty well for the Cardinals, had 23 points, 8 of 14 shooting, 5 of 7 from deep. You had 4 starters in double figures. Chucky Hepburn was great. Siobhan Hadley had 10 points. Rain Smith had 10 points. Noah Waterman had 12. James Scott had 4. I will say this moving forward. James Scott has to be better. Same with Noah Waterman. They have to do a better job of being able to stay on the floor, especially James Scott. Like, you have to know you don't have that many bodies. And I know you're going into a place where if you even breathe on the guy, you're going to get called for a foul. But James Scott has to do a better job of staying composed and not getting into foul trouble because Louisville doesn't have the size. So I think that you still need Waterman and James Scott to give you a little bit more as you move forward. But Louisville lost this game by 8 points. There's no moral victories. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. In the win-loss column, it doesn't show 93 to 85 loss and then have an asterisk where it points out that you played well. No, it doesn't. Defense has to be better. I think that is something that we can all agree on, right? On-ball defense has to be better. You give up 93 points. Rebounding, you got out-rebounded by 10, 41 to 31. Kentucky has more size. That honestly was kind of to be expected, but still, it's not good to see it on the screen. So all things considered, you go to Rupp Arena, your first road game of the year against the number 5 team in the country who just so happens to be your rival. You have basically 7 scholarship guys. And one guy on the other team, a 22% shooter from deep this year, shot 6 of 6 from 3, 10 of 10 from the field. He had a career high 33 points. He was basically a career high almost in the first half. All that considered, and you had your chances to seize the momentum. You lost this game by 8 points. So again, no moral victories, but there's a difference between claiming moral victory and discussing positives. Now, with the 6-5 record, you're kind of at that point to where you don't have much more room for error. You lost to Ole Miss, you lost to Duke, you lost to Kentucky, you lost to Oklahoma. You're 1-4 in your last 5. You have Florida State, EKU to end the month, and then you get into the bulk of ACC play. At 6-5, I've seen a lot of people give up. I've seen it on social media. And that's the only reason that I'm addressing this. Because there's people saying, well, there's always next year or the season's over. And I don't think that people understand just quite how down the ACC might be this year, to where there is the opportunity to create a winning streak in the month of January and to be able to fight your way onto the bubble. I think that is a definite possibility. That's why I'm not writing Louisville off just yet. Because, I mean, they're giving you the evidence. They went toe-to-toe with Duke until they got gassed. They went toe-to-toe with Kentucky for the entirety of the game. Arguably, those are the 2 best teams that you will play for the rest of the year. The ACC is down, guys. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to run the table, but you're going to have a chance to stack some wins. That said, it has to start now. This Florida State game on Saturday, thankfully you have a week to be able to relax, regroup, and heal up and get ready for that game. It becomes a really key opportunity. Louisville needs to win that game against Florida State because you're going to probably beat Eastern Kentucky the next game. So you're able to get that momentum going into a matchup on New Year's Day with the North Carolina team that has had a tough schedule, but they're 5-4. They've dropped out of the top 25 rankings. You're going to have your opportunities. Not to mention, at some point in January, you're going to get Abubakar Traore back. And I'm not sure how much that's going to help from an offensive standpoint, but it gives you another body in the rotation. And I think it's going to really help you defensively. Not to mention, there is the possibility. I don't know how probable it is likely at this point, but I can tell you with certainty that Pat Kelsey and company are doing what they can to add an international prospect to this team to play next semester. Will it happen? I tend to think no, because there's two obstacles. Number one, you have to get the player cleared by the NCAA. That's the first thing. Number two, this might be the largest obstacle. You have to basically buy out that player's contract with their professional club, and I'm not sure how much of a financial possibility that is right now. That's probably not something that I obviously have the answer to. So if Louisville can add an international player that can at the very least be a player in the rotation, you get Traore back sometime in the next couple weeks, you get some depth, you can give guys some breaks in the game. I'm not writing this team off just yet. And I would advise you all not to either. You can fan however you want. That's just my recommendation. But like I said, Saturday was nuts. And it ended with the volleyball team getting back to the Final Four for the third time in 4 seasons. More on that when we come back on this Sunday evening episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. With the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. The best time to build Dani Busboom Kelly a statue was yesterday. The second best time is right now. What she has been able to turn this volleyball program into has been nothing short of remarkable. I know that there have been some great seasons before, but the national powerhouse that she has transformed this program into is incredible. This is the third Final Four in the last 4 seasons. Last year they lost against Pittsburgh. It snapped a back-to-back. It snapped back-to-back trips to the Final Four. They lost in the Final Four in 2021 to Wisconsin. 2022, the final game, they got swept by Texas. 2023 was a loss in the Elite Eight to Pittsburgh. And 2024, they will get a chance to avenge 2 regular season losses to Pittsburgh when they take on the Panthers on Thursday. Now, here is the fun part. They're all these storylines for this team being, and I quote, the team of destiny. Elena Scott and Anna DeBeer, this is their last rides, their senior years respectively. The Final Four is in Louisville at the KFC Yum Center, so you get to play in your home city trying to get that first national championship in program history. It has been a wild ride that I know I have, and I know that a lot of other people that listen to this show, we've all enjoyed. And it's awesome to see the crowds at the KFC Yum Center, Freedom Hall. I was at Freedom Hall in attendance for the Elite Eight matchup. Louisville had split the regular season series with Stanford. They lost in the regular season finale on the road in California. They had the rubber match on Saturday against the Cardinal. And I was a little bit worried when Louisville went down and lost the first set, because it seems like one of the trends that happens when Louisville loses sets is that teams go on an early run. I think Stanford was up 10-3 at one point. And Louisville battled back, but they just weren't able to get over the hump. So the Cardinals bounced back in the second set. I mean, bounce back is a choice because they won it 25-14. I mean, they came out, they snagged the momentum back. And then comes the third set, and that was a roller coaster of emotions. Louisville led for the majority of the first part, leading up to the race to 15. Stanford tied it at 16. And then both teams just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, not able to get any momentum. The Cardinals went up 23-20. Stanford took a timeout, and I'm thinking to myself, Louisville's going to win this third set. Well, the away team ended up making a run to go up 24-23. And volleyball is such a sport of momentum. It's incredibly stressful to watch. It's even more stressful to announce, but it's a really fun sport to announce because the action, just back and forth, back and forth. But Louisville was able to clutch up and win the third set 28-26, and then they ended up winning the fourth set 25-20. I thought that the middle of the Cardinals' attack and the defense were fantastic. It doesn't really show in the box score as much. Kara Cressy had 8 kills. Pekaran Kong, PK, had 6 kills, but they were fantastic when it comes to, blocking at the net. I couldn't have been any more proud of how well they just bottled up the middle of the court. Both of those players played incredible. Anna DeBeer had 15 kills, didn't swing the best, but she was able to muscle through and play well. Sofia Maldonado Diaz swung at a 385 clip and had 12 kills. And then Charity Looper was fantastic, 346 and 13 kills. Elena Scott, obviously, fantastic in terms of defense. She had 13 digs. Looper had 13. Overall, Louisville now going back to the Final Four for the third time in 4 seasons. You have a chance. You're playing at home. You're playing a team that, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. Pittsburgh is a dynamic offense led by Olivia Babcock, who is only a sophomore, but the Cardinals really hadn't had an answer for her in either of the first 2 matchups. So it's going to be pretty interesting to watch this. But I think that Louisville is going to have, obviously a huge fan backing at the KFC Yum Center. I hope that the whole arena is red in favor of Louisville because Nebraska's there, and we know how crazy that volleyball fandom is when you can pack a football stadium. So there's going to be a lot of Cornhusker fans, but really hoping that Louisville can be able to rise to the occasion and just win that first game, and then we'll focus on the national championship. But the storylines are there. Dani Busboom Kelly's team is knocking once again. This time, will they be able to open the door? We'll see. But was a wild, wild weekend. When we come back on tomorrow's episode of the show, there's some commitments on the football side that we need to discuss, that we will break down some more film when we come back on the Monday episode of the show. Everyone have a great start to your week. I do want to apologize for not having as much UK basketball or UK U of L basketball preview. Obviously, I had the food poisoning on Thursday that prevented the episode then. And then with all the football news, it was just crazy. Like I said, it's a crazy time. And I'm going to do my best in the time that I have to talk about things, in a timely manner. So that's going to wrap up this Sunday evening episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day, great night, great start to your week. We'll see you right back here